welcome to The Buzz. We're going to pick up where we left off here at Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie. Last time we covered the history, the habitat, the wildlife. Now we're going to be discovering more about the restoration of the land, including learning more about the bison experiment. Get ready for part 2 on this episode of The Buzz. Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie is located in Wilmington and was the first of its kind in the country, and it now is over 18,000 acres. On our last episode, we learned about the natives who were here before us, saw ruins from old farmsteads, and explored these bunkers from the old ammunition plant. Now that the land has been restored, we're learning more about the thriving biodiversity. Let's meet up with the Midewin team to see the next chapter in our story. We were talking earlier about the history, and we're removing the bunkers and trying to get the land kind of back restored. What kind of types of restoration happens here?
So we actually, if we go back further, people think of restoration as installing the plants and broadcasting seeds, but we really go back further and when it starts with the decontamination process. Because of the most recent land use history here, the land in certain areas was very contaminated, including the streams, and the land was just very altered. This area was designated one of the largest and most complicated Superfund sites in terms of what was necessary to decontaminate it. So they set up a really large bioremediation facility, which simply is oversimplified is sort of scooping up the soil, putting it in long heaping rows, introducing microbes, and those microbes naturally digest the soil and kind of break it down.
Well, that's nice and natural. I was picturing using more chemicals to get rid of chemicals.
It's luckily the microbes just do it through their digestion, you know, for those pieces of it. There was still soil that was too contaminated, like with PCBs and metals and such, and that was just completely disposed of.
So fast forward, do you put more plant plugs in here, or did the plants come back on their own?
There's a middle step.
Okay, step. I missed the step.
So decontamination, and then actually and some of it happened simultaneously, but there's a lot of demolition that had to happen too.
Oh, sure.
On the east side is where a lot more arsenal structures were, and a lot of those were built with toxic things like asbestos and transite and arsenic and things like that. So some of those buildings were completely removed or at least stripped of those toxic materials. Part of demolition, I guess you could sort of consider, you know, recontouring the land and removing drainage tiles, because there was just, you know, thousands of miles of drainage tiles. There was railroads and roads and all sorts of other infrastructure. So all of that, you know, had to be dealt with to return the land to a more, you know,
natural place.
Yeah. Now we're at the proper reconstruction and restoration.
Yeah, there's a lot that had to happen before then. I didn't realize.
Yeah, so that's what makes Midewin so fascinating, really, as you've heard in other ways. It's just the land use history and things like that. But for the current mission, it is, you know, supposed to be a national tallgrass prairie. So a lot of this is actually, just for the scale of things, has happened since 1996.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people consider Midewin ahead of schedule, according to the Prairie Plan.
Okay, well that's great news.
Yeah.
It's always good to be ahead of schedule.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of challenges along the way, you know, but yeah, it's looking really beautiful.
So we've healed the soil a little bit. We've got the structures out. Next is to kind of tackle all the acreage of land and do the actual restoration. So how's that like?
Well, as you can imagine, all these processes take a lot of partners and volunteers.
There's no way one person could handle this.
There's way too many to name throughout the entire 27 past years, but to feature the most massive endeavor is called the Glacier Prairie Plains Project area. And the partners involved in that was a $6.7 million restoration area. It added an additional 1,900 acres to connect a bunch of prairie patchworks. So that kind of puts us at somewhere around like a little over 4,000 acres in some some level of restoration right now. So
Okay.
those partners that came together to make that project happen were the United States Forest Service, the Wetlands Initiative, which led a lot of the work, Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, the National Forest Foundation, and Grand Victoria Foundation.
Right.
So those are some main partners, you know, that were part of this project.
Okay, so what does that project entail? What does that?
So so specifically around that like 1,900 acres, in order to connect all those prairie patchworks, it was a lot of breaking drainage or completely removing drainage tiles to return a more natural hydrology to the land. It entailed actually filling in this sand ridge area that was severed by our roads that the Army put in. It included just other types of contouring. It included a lot of seeding with large equipment, broadcast seeding in the winter months. And then also in the spring and summer and fall months, you know, a lot of volunteers, corporate donor employees coming out and installing actual plugs in the ground too. So, but the Wetlands Initiative does have a full crew, and they were doing a lot of the work and inviting volunteers, you know, whenever possible.
So all of this was pretty much like planted either by seed or by hand.
Yes,
that's
because
amazing.
If you were
like,
to see,
look at all this.
Yeah, I know.
Think of a bare land, and now it has all these plants.
People who have been here since Midewin's establishment or before wouldn't even recognize this. If you just set them right in the middle and they looked around, they probably wouldn't even know where they're at. It looks so different. Every single row, you know, was roads lined with bunkers, and it was just Eurasian pasture grasses, things like that. There was not the biodiversity, and there was all the structures and roads, so it looked very different, you know. It's a prairie now.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. So let's talk about the actual restoration. We have a lot of partners in place. What's the actual work that needs to be done?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty romantic to think about just coming out here and scattering some seed and ta-da, you've got prairie, but it's much more complicated than that. So it involves, you know, a lot of management after that point. So even though the funding comes up front to get the plants in the ground, it takes a lot of management tools to keep it looking pristine until it really starts functioning like a prairie. Things start looking like a prairie before they start fully functioning like a prairie. But so in the meantime, it takes a lot of management, and the management tools most commonly used are fire, grazing by cattle and bison, depending on the area, and just a lot of invasive management utilizing staff and volunteers and such. That's either chemically, by hand, you know, things like
something like that. And you brought us to one of your favorite/best places. Why would you say this is one of the best restored areas?
To me, I love this area because it gets you up for a wider vista, and I could just imagine, you know, everything that has taken place in all these areas, you know, just what it used to look like even 10,000 years ago, you know, even 400 years ago, and then bring us to current. And, you know, all the volunteer projects that have happened here, all the partners, just all the work, and just every direction I could see, I am just flooded with really, really awesome memories.
We are at one of the project kind of locations. We're at the seed beds. And can you tell us more, like, how this project's from start to finish and how this affects Midewin?
Sure. So there's a lot of action, a lot of action at this spot, you know, with volunteers and partners and staff. TNC in general has been around since Midewin's establishment, and even before, and it was helpful in getting Midewin established. But beyond that, starting in 2004, we took on the responsibilities of mobilizing the volunteers. The Forest Service saw a need. Volunteer coordinators were not a really, really common position, so we filled that need. And it's, I mean, obviously one of my favorite things to talk about. Volunteers are the momentum towards getting towards mission goals. These are seed beds. If you saw it from the opposite way, these are very long rows, and each has multiple different species. It's kind of like row crops, but with native prairie plants. And so it takes a lot of helping hands to harvest the seed. And we try to grow the seed that is either most expensive or unavailable through commercial growers. Some of the other stuff we do get commercially grown. But yeah, this is a hot spot for participation. And once the seeds are harvested, there's another program that utilizes this space often, and that's the Mighty Acorns Youth Education Program.
Okay.
And so they have a stewardship component along with all their nature lessons and free exploration. And the volunteers are the ones that lead those projects.
Okay.
So those Mighty Acorn students are also helpful in like harvesting a bunch of seed. Seeds go from here and they go back to the horticulture building and get processed, and they get back out on the land in various ways. They either get back out on the land just in large seed mixes broadcasted with equipment, or they're grown for a couple of years to establish a little root system, and then they get planted like you're seeing here that the youth crew was doing today. They get established as a plug. Some of the really heartwarming projects that have been really rewarding for volunteers that are popping in my mind most recently is planting tens of thousands of violets for the regal fritillary butterfly, which is its host plant, and also tens of thousands of milkweed plants for the monarch. And that's been just really impactful, and it's really rewarding because you can see actually
see that change.
Yeah, you see that change.
The benefits are great when you invest in nature by donating to the Nature Foundation of Will County. You can help protect our precious habitats and restore natural areas back to their native state. Provide educational opportunities to unlock the natural world for present and future generations. Support diversity and inclusion so everyone can experience the magnificence of nature. The Nature Foundation works hand in hand with the Forest Preserve District of Will County to strengthen the commitment to land stewardship, nature education, wellness, cooperation, and sustainability. Donations large and small make a lasting and significant positive impact on the environment. Invest in nature and join our growing community. Support the cause at willcountynature.org.
It takes all of us working together on the federal and the state, the county, and the local levels to set aside spaces and to prioritize that. When the federal government decided that they were going to transition the former Joliet Arsenal into something else, we were one of the local entities that pushed for it to be set aside as open space. We began working with the Forest Service shortly after they took ownership of the property or responsibility for the property, and we actually assigned one of our landscape architects to the site, and we worked through a cost-sharing agreement with them to assist with the creation of their first prairie plan. At that same time, we were working on the development of the Waponsie Glacial Trail, which runs down the western side of Midewin. And we'd always envisioned a connection between the Waponsie Glacial Trail and Midewin as a way to bring folks from the central part of our county, or eastern or even northern parts of our county, down to Midewin and to see this resource. When you think about what was set aside, 19,000 acres, currently about 23,000, I believe, if you include the National Cemetery and the other properties that are here, that's about the same size as the Forest Preserve District's holdings across the entire county. So we're set up with 81 preserves and regional trails throughout the county, And here you have a concentration as if all of that property were to come together into one cohesive and contiguous block. One of the benefits of having this amount of space contiguous as open space is that you can have a lot of different habitats and a lot of different species that can cohabitate within it. Where our preserves also harbor some very rare and endangered species and some quality habitats, a site like this offers an opportunity to have all of that in one without the breakage or without the edges that our kind of built environment creates.
We're here at the bison pasture. This is the place to start looking for them. They're spotting scopes. Today we don't see any up close, but we're going to learn more about them. Let's start with, when did the bison arrive?
The bison arrived in mid-October of 2015.
And why did they come to Midewin?
Well, we have a prairie plan, and bison were always part of that prairie plan. We want to see how they affect the restoration process. But then again, cattle are part of that restoration process too. They do different jobs. But part of it is always how it affects how tall the grasses are, what grassland birds are there.
Okay, and you mentioned cattle. This is a good question. There's bison and there's buffalo. Can you tell us the difference?
Yes, I can tell you this. And first of all, let me tell you, I'm okay with using the term buffalo.
Okay.
Some places get really picky. Bison or bison is the scientific name.
Okay. Easy to remember.
Easy to
we know
remember.
that now.
I like that.
Bison.
Yeah. But I'm good with buffalo because we have used that longer historically than any other word. Okay. When the French first arrived here, they called them la bouffe or bouffe à l'eau. And if you put a French accent with that, which I can't do very well, it's oxen by the water. And we kind of, the English corrupted their buffalo to buffalo eventually. So I'm good with that. But think about it, the Sioux Indians call them Tatanka. The Potawatomi Indians call them Kosuka. Everybody has a different name for them, and they could have more than one name for the same animal, depending on what they're doing or what, is it a male, a female, a calf?
Sure.
So I'm okay with buffalo or American buffalo. Now the difference would be we have Asian and African water buffalo, the water buffalo.
The bay, like the
big
horns.
Yeah, and each of those look a little different. Less hair. They're the water buffalo in Africa are definitely wild, like these buffalo are. They definitely look different. They don't have the big hump that our buffalo have. So that's the biggest difference, I would say.
And you mentioned these buffalo are wild, so even though there's like gates to keep them in, it's not necessarily like a zoo where they're like trained on where they're going to get fed and waving to the public.
And we really don't feed them for the most part. They are big grass eaters. 93% of their diet is grass. They eat maybe about 5% of the flowering forbs, not a lot. And maybe a little browse, the soft ends of twigs, But cattle, on the other hand, eat everything. So that's the difference.
So that's kind of the experiment, too, of being more picky.
Bison are constantly moving, grazing, moving. They eat about 5 times a day. After they eat, they sit down and spend a lot of time chewing their cud, so re-eating what they just ate.
Oh, tasty.
So about 18 hours a day of just moving and eating. That's what they do.
And how many are there out there?
Right now there are 60 to 70. We get a count usually at our roundup in October. And even though the entire pasture area is divided into 4 sections with a corral in the center, it's about 1,000 acres. What you're seeing them on now is about 360 acres.
And where are they? I know a lot of people are probably trying to be like, where can I go see them?
And I would like to say they'll be here. Remember, bison are poor sighted, but they have a really great smell. So they probably know someone's along here watching them. But they could be laying down and put their heads down and might see them. They might, right now, they could be in the center section and where we can't see them. We do have a bison cam.
Oh, nice.
Which allows people to see them. We try to point it on where they are. Sometimes they'll be further away, sometimes close up. They do have a drinking area in
Okay.
a well we have run with a trough,
Mhm.
but we also, there's tributaries running through some of the pasture areas, so they can always find water, but they only have to come in once a day to get water.
Okay, yeah, so
Wherever
they're
they
not
get
going to be.
But they're going
hanging
to drink a
down
lot of water. They'll
Yeah.
drink 10 to 12 gallons of water if it's hot or more, but they only have to come in once a day to do that.
there. Wow.
Okay, you can see out in the pasture here, there's areas that look like they've been mowed, and then areas on this side that are kind of overgrown a little bit. Nothing's being done with them. Sometimes when you come out, there may be areas where it seems like there's strips or stripes, they're almost burned. Could be areas that have been herbicided. So that's all part of the experiment. Experiment basically involves how we're going to change pasture land, non-native grass, into tallgrass prairie. And we're doing a lot of things. We're mowing, we're burning, we are planting native seed, we are herbiciding, but we're also including bison in the mixture. We're trying to decide, the fact that they're herding together, they're wallowing, all the things that bison do in their grazing. Is that going to affect how fast or slow we are able to restore an area?
Okay.
Combined with the other things or separate from the other things. So, however the experiment is rolling out,
Yeah.
what's going to happen?
And how long is this experiment going to be taking place?
I'm not actually sure about the exact length of the experiment. It probably depends on
what
they're
the
looking,
results are,
Yeah,
yeah.
what the results are, what they're looking for. But they're gonna go on and see what happens, and hopefully we get some actual tallgrass prairie growing in these pastures.
Fantastic. And I don't know if you can answer this. Will the bison ever leave the experiment, or when the experiment's done, do they get shipped somewhere else? Are they bison forever?
I would hope there are bison forever. That would be my hope.
Mhm.
Because this is tallgrass prairie, and it's the first national tallgrass prairie in the country. We have all the fencing up. We have a corral
Yeah.
system. I would hope that, and people are always interested in how does it affect the other animals out here? Is the experiment the only thing deciding on whether they're going to stay? Probably not.
Okay.
And I can't actually answer
Yeah.
that question for you, but there's probably a lot of factors that will affect them staying.
And have you seen any results, just in your own personal opinion, from pre-bison to now we've had them for a few years?
Personally, I haven't, but I have an anecdote for you.
Okay.
There are two things that they found, and they involve what I have in my pocket here, which is some
Ooh.
bison fur wool. This would
Nice
have been like a
Oh, guys,
winter coat.
It's really furry, very soft. I would think it's more coarse, but it's not. It's very snuggly.
Yeah, and because it's so snuggly, they have found this specifically. One of our people, we have a bird that's called a logger-headed shrike.
Oh yeah.
And it was a nesting and they're monitoring them.
Okay.
And they took a mirror and they looked up in its nest and
And it has all that in there.
and then we have a ranger trailer for our volunteer rangers, and this was back in 2016, and they were cleaning it out after the winter. Mouse nest,
All made of that. So the wildlife, at least, is
wildlife
taking advantage.
is taking advantage of it. So I think that's good. They are seeing some more short-eared owls. An egret has been seen in the pasture, and can we say for sure that that's
Right,
different or not?
correlates.
Maybe not, but so they're taking advantage of it. Maybe.
I'm very used to having deer being our largest animal in our forest preserves. Can you compare bison to deer? Do they have any similarities?
They do.
Okay.
Okay, they don't have top teeth in the front,
Oh,
just like
yeah.
deer don't.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So that would be one similarity. They eat grass, but they're wild, much
Okay.
more wilder and much more dangerous because they have poor eyesight. They're easy to startle.
Okay.
And they're as likely to run towards you as away from you.
Most time deer would just be like, I'm out of here. But
Yeah.
bison are going to hold their ground.
They
down.
will. And
Okay.
just like any other animal, mothers are going to be very protective over their young.
Sure.
And the bulls are very bullish. They're
Yeah.
aggressive.
Yeah.
And because that's what they're made to be.
Okay.
And they're very large. The bulls are, imagine 10 refrigerators or 2 telephone poles.
9 refrigerators for 2 telephone poles?
That's the weight of those is what is the 2 tons.
Okay.
1 ton, 2,000 pounds. What is a male bison will weigh at full throttle.
Okay, and how tall are they if we were standing right next to
If you
one?
went to the shoulder height, they're 5 foot 6 inches tall. But
Oh, that's me.
That's not really counting
the
hump
head and the
hump,
hump. And,
which is huge.
okay. That's
Um,
quite large.
Female is a little bit smaller. She can run anywhere from 8,000 to 1,100 pounds. So just figure 1,000 even, right?
All right.
So that is 1 grand piano or what was 2 snowmobiles. Oh, yeah. So that's her weight.
Fun.
So so they're very large animals, and they seem like they're quiet and docile, but in a minute they could take off at you or away from you. They run 35 to 45 miles an hour. They run faster than a racehorse. Racehorse can run 40 miles an hour for 1 mile.
Okay.
They can keep it up for 5 miles.
Ooh.
So they're gonna outrun a racehorse.
Yes.
So they're very fast animals, and they're very sharp horns.
Okay, and that brings me to my next question of, we can never go in there.
We can never go in there,
Right?
okay? There is a pipe fence, there is a barbed wire fence. We are not meant to go in there. It's for the bison, and they want to be in there, and they don't want to have anything to do with us.
Okay, and we were mentioning baby bison. When is baby season?
Baby season is anywhere March, April,
Okay,
in through May.
through May, yeah.
Okay, the rut season is going to be June through October, mainly July and August.
Okay,
So that's when babies for the next season. And it's about 9.5 months.
okay. And when they have the babies, do they take care of them? Or are they kind of on their
They
own?
do. They are born with their eyes open,
Mm-hmm.
25 to 40 pounds. Within a few minutes, they're walking. Within a few hours, they can run. They have a red colored fur as opposed to the brown. They're called red dogs.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah. So since the bison have come to Midewin in 2015, they've been a big draw for people coming to see Midewin. People want to see the bison, and it has been a great draw for folks coming in. We get to see the people, they get to see the bison hopefully, or attempt to see the bison, because they're always moving around, but it brings them in to see other animals that we have here. We have so many different birds that live here. There are other animals that live here. There are insects that live here. There is beautiful native plants that live here, miles and miles of trails to walk, bike, and even horseback ride. So the bison have been a help to us. They have been an ambassador for Midewin.
Thank you to the incredible team here at Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie. We've learned so much over the course of 2 episodes, from the history to the restoration to the beautiful habitat here. And the best part is, it's right here in Will County. So make sure to map your next adventure at Midewin by visiting their Welcome Center or download their app. I hope to see you out looking for the bison, but until then, I'll see you next time on The Buzz.